Welcome back, everybody. It is great to have you as we go into the sixth session of our Fit Show Live online program. Can't believe how we are rattling through these sessions today. And thank you so much to everybody that's stayed with us. We can see all of you engaging and interacting, which is brilliant. If you are new to the sessions and you've just signed on for the first time this afternoon, you can ask a question just by popping it in the chat box or clicking on the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. And I will make sure we get those questions to Lee at the end of his session. As we say, it's really about interacting and getting you guys as engaged as much as possible. So we would love to hear from you both on those questions and on your feedback to the sessions. We are recording these sessions, but please don't worry if you see the record button anywhere. It is only the presenter and the host whose faces will be visible. So don't worry if you've not got your lipstick on, we can't see you. Don't worry too much. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Lee Galley, who is the assessor manager at RISA. Has got many years of experience in inspections and assessing construction and building projects. So great wealth of experience, thought leadership in this area. And he's going to be talking to us about everything you need to know about building regulation changes. So without me doing anything more, I'm going to pass over to you, Lee. I'm going to switch off my camera and my microphone. And you please share your screen and crack on.
Hello, certainly will. Just before I start, I just noticed in the chat side, we say it's Lee from FENSA, not from FENSA, from RISA. It's entirely separate. Please don't send me your questions relating to FENSA. There'll be too many. Okay, there we go. So what we are going to do is talk through some of the upcoming changes and proposed changes to the building regulations that affect the window and door industry. Before we do that, let me just explain a little bit about who we are. So RESA are Rushworth Inspection Services and Auditing. We are entirely owned by the GGF, Glass and Glazing Federation. We provide inspection services to FENSA. We do roughly around about 1,000 to 1,100 FENSA inspections every month, but also inspect for some other key clients, including the Federation of Master Builders. We do a couple of hundred inspections every month for those. We have 15 assessors based around the country. They are all recruited directly from the glass and glazing industry. Most of them come from a installation manager or from a surveyor background, so they are well versed in the installation side of the industry. We also carry out quite a lot of expert witness reports, and more commonly nowadays Section 75 claim reports. We get a lot of requests for inspections from the big finance providers, from retailers, and also from homeowners in support of a claim of some kind. There's a lot of that out there at the moment, and it's becoming a growing part of our business. Move on to what we're going to talk about today, though, if we can, which is the impact of changes to the building regulations for the window and door industry. We've got some changes upcoming, and we've also got some that have had the first stages of consultation processes, and we're waiting for the outcome of those. The first one, which I'm sure you'll all be aware of, is the proposed changes to approved document F, which is the means of ventilation. So there has been a program, a couple of others coming up as well. We'll get through to these as we go on. Document L1 is also included in the same consultation process as document F, so you would have seen that one coming through. Approved document S may be new to most people, actually, and it was to me, but we'll cover that briefly as well. And just a quick word when I get to the end about approved document Q as well, and how that mainly new build set of regulations at the moment may start to affect the replacement window industry sooner rather than later. So let's get on with approved document F and approved document L, if we can. So approved document F is ventilation issues, and most commonly to us that will mean trickle vents and background ventilation, and the necessity to fit trickle vents where they are previously fitted in replacement installations, and fit them almost everywhere where it is a new build situation. There's been a consultation process ongoing about changes to both approved document F and approved document L. That process has now closed, and we will see the results of that consultation process scheduled in December of this year, with potential implications and implementation of those changes in June of next year. So stand by for those. We'll cover them in a little more detail, but that actual consultation process is now closed. The consultation process I went to, which I live here in Cardiff in Wales, I went to the Welsh Government consultation process, which was a big meeting they had at City Hall in Cardiff. Had a panel of scientists sitting on the stage. They looked like an episode of University Challenge from the 1970s, and they told us their scientific findings about ventilation and what should be done. They very much were not from the window industry. They didn't look at it from a window industry point of view, which is why the consultation process has been ongoing, and why the GGF and other organisations have been asked to submit their recommendations and their responses to that proposed changes to the documents. You can see the timelines there. So we're expecting that implementation in June of 2022, June to July of 2022. The proposal on approved document F, and this is where it becomes controversial, especially from a replacement window installation point of view, is to make the requirement to fit a trickle vent compulsory on all replacement installations. At the moment, across those 14,000 a year inspections we do on behalf of FENSA, we are looking for you to comply with the current regulations, which is not to make that means of ventilation any worse than the existing. The proposal is to change that, and to change it quite dramatically. So where the outgoing windows do not contain background ventilation, or the rate of ventilation is unknown, so basically there may be trickle vents, but you don't know how much ventilation they're allowing, then for habitable rooms, which is all rooms other than kitchens and bathrooms, you will be expected by the consultation document, this isn't set in stone yet, but this is what was in the consultation document, to put in 8,000 square millimeters equivalent area per habitable room. Now that's a lot of trickle vent. Most vents at the moment are 2,500 or 5,000. 8,000 is a lot of trickle vent to get in a window. Same in kitchens, so 8,000 again. In bathrooms, with or without a toilet, the minimum will be 4,000 millimeter square equivalent area. So again, a sizable vent in what can quite often be a fairly small window in a bathroom or a toilet. If the dwelling will have continuous mechanical extraction, so if there's a mechanical system already fitted, then that requirement for background ventilation will drop to 4,000 millimeters squared equivalent area. So fairly equivalent to what it is at the moment, actually. Now, there are some things to consider in all of that, isn't there? So firstly, that's going to increase the cost to manufacturers and consumers. Those trickle vents come at a cost. Increase in the energy to heat the cooler air. So it's going to let a lot of cooler air into a building. That's what it's designed to do. But obviously people don't want to sit in colder rooms. So potentially they're going to have to turn the heat up to do that. Potential for unwanted noise entering buildings. Now, this is the most common complaint I hear about trickle vent installation. I'm sure it is the most common complaint that most people hear about it, is the amount of noise that you get through a window compared to a window without a trickle vent in there. So that's something that's going to need to be thought about, certainly. Challenges to the supply chain will increase in demand. So is there enough capacity out there to produce all these extra trickle vents? Industry will need to overcome negative customer perception. Yes, you see, that's very interesting, isn't it? We are constantly told, and homeowners tell me as well as telling you, that they don't want to replace their existing trickle vents, let alone put them in where they didn't have a trickle vent. So there is a customer perception there to overcome, should the proposed document go through unchanged. Increased risk of rogue installers that do not comply with regulations winning more business. Now, this is, again, a very, very common complaint that we hear as an inspection body, and my guys on the road hear time and time again. They will say, Lee, we're constantly up against a company down the road that aren't registered, and they are not going to have to comply with this, and we are going to lose business to that. So that's another issue that needs to be discussed and needs to be overcome. Move on to the second part of the same consultation, if we can, which was document L1. Now, this is about the thermal efficiency of the window, and this really is less controversial than those changes that we've just discussed in regard to document F and ventilation. So the proposal that the government made in order to meet their target of going net carbon zero for emissions at some point in the future is to reduce the allowable U value and increase the thermal efficiency of all windows. So at the moment, we are looking for a replacement window to meet a U value of 1.6 or better, or a WER rating of C or better. The proposal is to reduce that U value to 1.4 or better, and the energy rating, the WER rating, down to a B or better. Replacement doors with 60% or more glazing, because we don't have to register doors with less glazing than that, will be down to 1.4, again on the U value, or a C rating again on the WER, which is quite a big change in England, not necessarily here in Wales, where the figures were a little bit different in the first place. But at the moment, 1.8 will get you a compliance on a door, or a WER of E. So that's quite a substantial drop on doors in comparison to the drop in windows. But honestly, that's all achievable, isn't it? With materials, with most UPVC systems certainly, and modern glass systems out there, that's not as difficult to achieve as those proposals, certainly regarding approved document F. There will be, of course, stuff to consider in all of that. Let me go back a little bit. So again, that comes at a potential increase in cost to manufacturers and consumers, of course. The reduction of steel reinforcing available to some types of applications. So in order to meet those U values and WR calculations, it may be that certain systems aren't going to be able to use steel reinforcing anymore. Now that obviously has some implications, especially as we are seeing an increase in the amount of dark coloured profile. So a lot of dark greys and blacks and wood grain profiles going in that need a high degree of reinforcing. How's that going to be achieved if the thermal requirements rule out the use of steel reinforcing in lots of applications? Could be particularly challenging for some window door material types, so especially aluminium and steel. Now, there's no reason they can't comply, but there is more work needs to be done and more thought needs to be going into those particular materials. We see a lot of failures already on approved document 1 when we're inspecting for aluminium systems, especially where people aren't sure of how the system they're supplying is actually complying. We ask them to provide the evidence of compliance, and quite often they'll send us back a U-value certificate or WE calculation, which actually proves that the window they've just fitted doesn't comply. So it's particularly important to know when fitting those types of products how you're complying and whether that product you've specified actually complies. Some new energy rating registrations may be required. That's again all perfectly possible. So a quick slurp of coffee and we'll move on to approved document S, which is new to everybody as far as I'm concerned. So important to say up front that this only applies to new build installations at the moment. But what we have seen through the years with building regulations is stuff that starts as a requirement for new build only, such as the trickle vent issue we discussed a little while ago, often then trickles down into the replacement market as well. So we need to be aware of this stuff because it may well come on board for replacement window installations at some point in the future. With this one, I don't think that will be anytime soon. I honestly don't. But at the moment, just a new build issue. So the proposal for both England and Wales has two requirements. It's to limit the unwanted solar gains in summer. So the glass we fit, especially the thermally efficient glass we fit nowadays, has a lot of G factor, so there's a lot of solar gain in there. We're getting overheating, or the overheating has been reported in certain properties in the middle of summer that is not desirable. It makes houses too hot and people are putting a lot of energy into cooling them. So it's to limit that. And it's to provide adequate means to remove excess heat from the indoor environment. So how are you going to get rid of that heat build up? The English approved document splits the country into two areas, Greater London and England, and it's been decided that this is more of a risk within Greater London, so that they've treated that as a separate area for the moment. My colleagues in Scotland in the north are keep telling me that actually they get more direct sunlight in Scotland in the north than they do in Greater London, so it should be a consideration there as well. The properties are split, this gets slightly technical, sorry, into two groups in England, which is Group A, which is a very complicated description, more than two fabric elements opening on opposite facets to allow cross ventilation, or two or fewer elements, fabric elements openable on facets which are not opposite. So basically that means, does your house have a back and front or two sides where really if you open the window back and front the air will blow through? Most houses are going to fall into, most dwellings are going to fall into that A group where there are windows front and back, and if you open them both there will be the possibility to create a through draft. Now unusually in Wales they've simplified this a little bit, and like I say, I live here in Wales and most stuff the Welsh government puts out is more complicated than the English equivalent, but they made this one slightly clearer in as much as saying, well, if your house does have a front and a back then it's going to fall into that group, and they've simplified that expression of how you make that differential a little bit clearer. Basically it's the same in terms of what they're proposing. So the maximum allowable glazing area is introduced. This figure differs slightly between England and Wales, but it is very, very similar. The maximum glazed area should be no more than 13% of the floor area for Greater London. Okay, so as I said, they've separated Greater London, and that 13% of the floor area is not that great, and that's in that type B description. For type A it's up to 35% of the floor area for dwellings in Wales in Group 2, which is that Group A in England. As I said, gets a bit technical. In some cases the Welsh approved document allows an increase in glazed area if shading is used. So if external shutters or other forms of shading of use, you can increase that area. The exact figures there will need to be looked at very closely if you're doing new build work, and you need to comply with this regulation. You need to make sure that the glazed area you're being asked to supply doesn't exceed these particular percentages. It's very easy to do. We built an extension on the back of my house here. I'm looking down the garden at it now, last year, and being in the industry, I was very keen to go with the materials I know. So it's a huge set of bifold doors across the back with a glass gable at the top, and really the whole end of the building is glazed. And I've got to say, it gets very hot in summer. Should have considered it more, should have considered how we're going to provide some kind of shading, and we've had to do that after the event, in all honesty, because honestly, with the very firmly efficient glasses in there, it gets very hot in the summer and too hot, and we are now needing to shade that. So I can see the need for this regulation. I really can. Removing that excess heat from the building, there are various proposals in place, but a lot of that is to do with the shading. So if you can get some shade there, it's going to reduce that risk, and I mean, you can go for a bigger glazed area than you potentially would be able to without that. Another little interesting element in there is that the opening of the windows should be 18% at least of the floor area, so that to allow a lot of air to come through, and those openings should open to a minimum of 60 degrees. Now, for the bigger the window, 60 degrees is going to create a very wide opening, but to limit the risk of falling, the handles should not be more than 600 millimeters from the inside face of the wall. I had to read that a few times. What that means is you shouldn't have to reach more than 600 millimeters forward to close that window again from its fully open position. And again, that comes with some stuff to consider, doesn't it? So there's potential there for significantly reducing the amount of daylight that can get into a building. If you're reducing the size of the windows to limit that thermal gain, then are the homeowners, the proposed new homeowners, going to be happy with the amount of daylight that's coming in? Are the architects going to be on board with this? Are they going to be specifying windows that are compliant with those regulations? Limiting the glazing area could lead to smaller windows. Okay, so yeah, absolutely can. If you need to reduce the amount of glass, you're going to have to reduce the size of the windows in most cases. The fashion at the moment, isn't it, is for very big glass areas. I see a lot of stuff going up at the moment, which is almost entirely glass in new houses. The strategy of this approved document assumes windows being left open at night. Now, surely, come on, that's who's going to leave their windows fully open at night? May well pose a risk of security and unwanted noise, particularly at night time. And so if you're applying these rules to central London and greater London generally, that security risk has got to be considered, doesn't it, for leaving your windows open at night? But if that's how the amount of ventilation is calculated, then that needs to be considered. Move along a little. Approved document Q exists at the moment in new build and has done since 2015. Now, there may be some changes coming up to this. I don't know of any at the moment. I've not been informed on any. But what is going to happen, sorry, at some time in the near future, is those houses that were built under document Q since 2015, and this describes security issues, are going to start to come into the replacement market. And we've seen some already. People will sometimes want to replace the windows on a new build property relatively quickly. Now, from 2015 to now, only 6 years, that is quick, isn't it? But over the next few years, we are going to start to see increasingly more and more properties that were built under approved document queue start to come into the replacement window market. So people are going to start to replace the windows in those properties. And it will be important once they do that you consider that, and we start to replace them with document queue in mind as well. So the requirements of document queue are a reasonable provision must be made to resist unauthorized access to the building, to any dwelling, basically. So this means upgrading the security, so reducing the risk of breaking any part of a building from which access can be gained to a flat or apartment within the building, any new extensions to the existing dwelling, any replacement windows and doors installed within an existing dwelling is not in there at the moment. This is purely new build. Any new aperture created into an existing dwelling. Again, new build at the moment. Let's have a look at what that actually means, really, which is that the windows or doors being fitted into new build buildings at the moment should conform with PAS 24. So there are some other standards that apply there. Really, the easiest way to spot these properties, and the biggest challenge for the replacement window industry, will be that all easily accessible glazing should contain at least one pane of laminated glazing that is of at least 6.8 millimeters. So this is a particular standard that is in excess to what we're doing at the moment. Most laminate that I see at the moment is 6.4, but document queue calls for 6.8. So that's going to cause some challenges within the supply chain as well. Easily accessible areas comes with a definition. So basically that is anywhere on the ground floor, okay, or anywhere within 2 meters of a flat surface. So if there's a balcony that's easily accessible, somebody can climb onto that balcony. Again, you could consider the security there and fit that laminated glass into that particular element of the building as well. The class for glass that goes into new build at the moment in laminate glass is a thing called P1A, which is why it needs to be 6.8 mil and not 6.4 mil, which we see quite often. With the work we do for Federation of Master Builders, we look at a lot of new build installations, and a lot of them we foul for compliance with approved document queue because somebody's fitted 6.4 mil lam and not 6.8 mil lam. It doesn't sound like much of a difference, does it? But 6.4 will not get you the P1A classification that you must meet in order to comply with that regulation. And again, that comes at an increased cost, doesn't it? It's going to be a cost of actually fitting that, but there's also going to be some testing costs in there. If you've got to prove that the replacement windows you're going to fit into these buildings that were originally fitted with document queue compliant windows, you're going to have to prove that they comply with PAS 24 and potentially get some testing done across all those various different product types. So that's my quick run through of the proposed changes. I know there's a lot of technical information there. I'm more than happy to answer any questions in the next few minutes on any of those technical details and what that actually means to the new build industry, and more in my domain, the replacement window industry. So please fire those questions across to us as soon as we have any.
Thanks, Lee. That was really interesting, and I know new information that's really important for everybody. If you want to just come out of your screen sharing for me, that would be great. Thank you. And we can see if we've got any questions from anyone. We have had some comments on how lovely your shed looks.
Thank you.
Looks to be a very
clearing, but I can still only see. Yeah, that's escape that. Yeah, so built this shed a couple of years ago, more as a recreational facility, but since then, been working from home, like a lot of people across the country, makes a really good home office.
Yes, I think we've all been in that position, haven't we, where it's like, oh, I had that little bit of space that I was just having for my peace and quiet in the garden, and now it's my office. So yeah, you started a bit of shed envy there. But we have got a question for you coming in from our audience, if I can put this to you. So this is from Mike Rayner, who says, we fit a lot of box sash windows. I've heard that the new trickle vent regulations won't apply to heritage settings. Is this true, please?
Well, honestly, I don't know as yet. So that was one of the representations that the GGF made and other industry bodies made. So there's been a consultation document issued. We were concerned, and we all threw our hands up in the air and said, oh, hold on, what about all these other issues? And that being one of them. So we have made those representations, and hopefully that will come through, but the government are considering that at the moment. We won't know, honestly, until December.
So in terms of, there was an awful lot of information that was, and technical information that was in your presentation there, and an awful lot for people to take away. I just wondered if you could maybe summarize for us in 2 or 3 points, if people are going away from today thinking, all right, okay, what's the most important things I need to know right now when I'm going back to the office and starting work again tomorrow morning? So what kind of would be the 2 or 3 key priorities for you out of what you've been sharing with us today?
Yeah, okay. Certainly will. Before I do that, if I can, I just had a quick message from Dave Borland, who's the Chief Technical Officer at the GGF, who says trickle vent spec will not comply with heritage buildings. Okay, so heritage buildings comes with a defined definition, so be careful around that. But thanks, Dave. Yeah, they will not apply to heritage buildings. The key points from my point of view really is that I don't think we as an industry will have a problem with the proposed changes to document L1. Okay, so we've known this is coming for some time, and that reduction in the U value and the difference in the WR ratings should, for most products, be fairly easily achievable, and it's got to be a good thing moving forward. You know, we're all about reducing the carbon footprint and saving as much energy as possible. Don't see a problem with that. The trickle vent issue is tricky. Got to say that the feedback that my assessors have had from installers and installation companies on sites whilst we've been doing inspections has been a lot of worry indeed. The thought of having to tell homeowners that you've got to have this, whether you like it or not, it's not going to comply with the building regulations. If you like it or not, this is what you're going to have, fills people with dread. Personally, I don't think it's going to be, if it comes through unadulterated from its original proposal, you know, it's going to be problematic. I don't think it's going to be as problematic as people are suggesting. We will find a way of getting it done, won't we? I suppose, because we'll have to. But that's where most focus has been put, and that's going to be the most difficult element of it to actually comply with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I know kind of legislation is really, really important to our delegates and keeping up to date with everything. I know from doing FitShow Live previously on site, there are always those sessions that people really want to be at and need to get the latest information. So we really appreciate, thank you so much for keeping us up to date. We've another comment there. Thanks, David. Now need to find out what counts as a heritage building. So if anybody finds that out, then please do share that with the rest of us.
Yeah, it's we'll update that. The GGF will certainly update that as soon as that is confirmed. And if Dave's got any more to say on that, I'll certainly let you know, and you can pass it out to the group there anyway.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, FENSA GGF would be the place to look for that kind of information. So thank you so much, Lee. Really, really appreciate you taking the time to take us through that this afternoon. Yes, as Jessie's saying, I'm sure you guys will be back in May at FitShow Live when we're back on site to deliver some more of
we certainly will. Yeah, thanks for anyone that was in. Sorry, that's all a bit dry. It's a lot of facts and figures. It is regulations after all. I tried to make it as entertaining as possible. It is a bit dry, unfortunately. Thanks very much.
Important. Yeah, no, it's very important. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye. Bye, Lee. So for everybody else, for delegates who are watching us, that just closes the end of this session. Unfortunately, we have a little break in the programme now. So as I'm sure you will be aware, things change quite quickly in the current climate that we're working at. So I don't know if you've even had chance for lunch, those of you who have been with us all day. So now you've got a good 45 minutes to go away, make a brew, have a wander around the garden, stretch your legs. Maybe even reflect on some of the points from this morning and think about anything that you're going to take away and do differently in your business, maybe from David or from Elton, or just think about some of the changes that are coming through in the industry for us. But we'll be back online at 3:30 today, where we've got a fantastic panel talking about one of the biggest challenges to the industry, which is about skills, and that's attracting new talent and retaining talent within the industry. And we're talking to lots of different voices within the industry. We'd love you to be part of that conversation about how we can all help make sure that we are attracting the brightest talent and that we're keeping them when we've got them into the industry in the first place. So if you want to start logging back on to session number 8, it will be at 3:25, that'll be great, and we'll go live at 3:30. So I look forward to seeing you all then, guys. Have a nice break.